So welcome everybody to our April Education Night. Thank you so much for coming. Quick introduction. Decriminalize Nature is a grassroots movement to working to restore our right to develop personal relationships with entheogenic plants and fungi. Powerful natural allies that have been used for healing, growth, and spiritual insight for thousands of years. Here in Northwest Arkansas, Decriminalize Nature Northwest Arkansas is building community, raising awareness, and advocating for policy change to decriminalize the use, possession, and cultivation of plant and fungi medicines like psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, iboga, and mescaline-containing cacti. We work at the city council level to pass resolutions that functionally decriminalize by deprioritizing the arrest and prosecution of individuals who possess, grow, gather, and gift these plants and fungi. Through education, storytelling, and local advocacy, we aim to shift public perception, reduce stigma, and create safe, equitable access to these ancient medicines. We believe healing is a human right and that nature belongs to everyone. Tonight's education night is sponsored by Susan Kilpatrick of Sacred Roots Therapy. Susan isn't able to make it tonight, unfortunately, but we want to offer a heartfelt thank you to Susan for generously supporting tonight's space. Her support and all of your support make these gatherings possible. And we're so grateful to be here together in community. Tonight's event, After the Journey, Processing and Integration After Psychedelic Experiences, centers around one of the most essential and often overlooked parts of working with entheogenic plants and fungi, integration. We're honored to welcome Angie Leek as our featured speaker this evening. Angie brings a wealth of experience as a psychotherapist, somatic experiencing professional, and integration specialist through her practice at Holos Counseling. Her work with clinical trials, facilitator training programs, and the Holos Foundation show her deep commitment to making psychedelic healing more accessible and sustainable. Whether you're just beginning to explore psychedelics, have walked this path yourself, or work in mental health and want to better support others, tonight is for you. Let's settle in, open our hearts, and learn together how to walk with wisdom after the journey. Angie, take it away.
All right, thanks, Beth. Thanks for having me. And hi to those of y'all online and not here with us today. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. I think this is an important topic. I want to make this talk sort of interactive. I want to hear from y'all and what you want to know and how this is relevant to you. I've spoken on this topic many times, and I have slides that I'll draw from, but I don't want it just to be like an academic lecture. I want it to be meaningful to y'all. So I'll give you a chance in a minute to share what you would like to know. Tell me about your questions about integration, or how you would like to learn more about this and how it might apply for you specifically. So get your questions ready here in just a moment. And then also I want to keep this interactive. If you have a question that comes up along the way, please feel free to either put it in the chat on the Zoom or just raise your hand or jump in. So, and I'm going to be speaking next week as well at Open Plains. So my talk there isn't going to be exactly on this topic, but there's a lot of overlap, even some of the same slides. And I'm a little bit saturated in my preparation for that right now. So bear with me here. I hope this comes out smoothly and clearly here. Let me introduce myself just a little bit more. I think Beth covered the main points. I think the main things I want to share here is I believe in this work, and I think it's, plant medicine, psychedelic, entheogens. I think they're really important and useful tools, and I think we should have access to them. I don't think anybody should be going to jail for using them. And I also think it's important that we know how to support people, both before, during, and after their experiences. So it's really important to me to help share what I've learned about integration. I've done a lot of different trainings, and I've been at this professionally for a lot of years. But I'm also just me. I'm beyond all my roles and titles. I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a wife, I'm a partner. I'm also a psychonaut. Um, I'm a wounded healer. I'm all these things in addition to all these roles. So, um, I'll weave in a little bit about my story as well. So, a lot of my work has really come from my own attempt to heal myself and to make sense of existing, which isn't always easy. Um, and then before we go on, I want to also acknowledge those that have gone before us. I have lots of teachers that have inspired me, lots of brave women and men who have gone before us in this work, from shamans and indigenous wisdom keepers to researchers to psychonauts, and to the ancestors. So I won't go all into all their names, but yeah, just acknowledging this isn't mine, and I'm really excited to share things that I've learned from other people. So, I do want to take a minute here to talk about some of my personal process. And the teenage me discovered psychedelics at a pretty young age, and I am so glad I did. I'm so glad everything went well with all of my journeys because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have any support, but whew, it all worked out for the most part. But then it got a little chaotic. So the picture on the right is maybe a handful of weeks before I was had a psychiatric hospitalization. So not a fun thing to have to go through. It was also in the midst of an incredibly beautiful healing experience. So if you see, I look pretty joyful right there. And so did the people around me. Jason's actually in the corner there. You can't really see him. He's in the shadows, but so I'm sharing this partly. There's going to be an arc that we tie together here. And then there's little me there, and that's with my childhood best friend who tragically was killed a handful of years after that picture was taken. And I went through a lot of issues with grief and loss and being really alone in my process. And I later learned more about why. So if we go further on to the left, that on the upper left is my great grandfather, Frank McMath, and that's in Lubbock, Texas. And then that's my grandfather, Carol McMath, his son. So Frank died in a really unfortunate and tragic way and left Carol orphaned by his tragic death. And then that picture below there is Carol later in his adult life. And in his adult life, he was healthy and happy and stable and not traumatized by what he went through with his dad. What I like about this picture here is you can see his shadow behind him in this picture. So I had a series of ketamine journeys where I saw things from Frank's death, and then I saw a similar image with Carol. And what I saw was he was conducting band and he looked happy. He was so happy. He was living in this way where he was full of life. And then all of the trauma of the way his dad died was just tucked right behind him, out of his awareness. And he just compartmentalized it back there. So long story, but what I want to name there is shadow. So he kept it out of his awareness. That pattern is a pattern that was passed down. We don't talk about it. When Aaron died, we don't talk about it. We just move on. And then my sense is add a little LSD to the system, you raise the energy, and then boom, all the shadow stuff, all the stuff that gets repressed or tucked away came out. And it came out in a way that was chaotic and disruptive and destabilizing. So I'll talk about all this in more detail as we go. Coming back around full circle after these ketamine journeys and experiencing this intergenerational trauma, we began to heal it. So this is a picture of my parents and my children, and we actually went to Lubbock where all this happened in a sort of excavation journey. So mainly what I want to share here is how psychedelic medicines can help us heal. They can help us integrate repressed or suppressed or unconscious content so that we can be more whole. And I am so happy to be alive today where I have access to these things and can do this healing work on behalf of my ancestors that didn't make it, and on behalf of my children who I hope have better access to tools for their own healing moving forward. So, yeah. Moving on. So, setting an intention activates our will and alerts our unconscious that we are in a change process. So my intention, again, for this talk is just to talk about some of how we do integration, some of the why we do integration, some of the theory that might inform how we do integration. And then depending on where we go, we can go deeper into more layers of shadow work and somatic work. But I'd really like to hear from y'all. What would you like to know based on where you are in the world or where you are adjacent to these plant medicines? What would be helpful for you to know more about integration? Anybody?
I have something. So following, like, say, a psilocybin journey,
Mm-hmm.
a couple days afterwards, when you're just kind of feeling a little strange and having a hard time just integrating back into normal day, every day in life.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend to help kind of with that?
Yeah.
Weird alien-like feeling, like it's just yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Great question. So I will speak to that a little bit. I'm going to break down time. So like the immediate after the medicine, then like 24, 48 hours after, then the next couple of weeks after, and then sort of ongoing. But briefly, yeah, I think in the immediate after, like knowing, yeah, we're a little off, or some people are in afterglow, some people are a little, I can't remember the words you use, weird, off. Sometimes people feel really open, and so maybe extra sensitive to everything. That's a good time to just kind of chill. And if you can, don't be overscheduled or don't make big decisions, or good time to rest, journal, reflect, ground. Again, I'll say more about that, but I think that's a good question. So does that begin to address that?
I don't think for a better word than that.
Uh-huh. Well,
Very strange.
that's a good setup for some stuff I'm gonna speak to. So my title here is Cosmos, Psyche, Soma. So the cosmos, aliens, whatever, I think when we go into non-ordinary states of consciousness, we can go into really expansive states. And so then what? And when we come back, it's like we pass through all of our mind stuff, our identities, our personality, our relationships, and then we also have these bodies that we live in, so I think we have multiple layers that, once we go all the way out to here, like, how do we come back in to where we live, which is here? So we may feel a little alien-like, and I think that's normal and common to feel that way sometimes. So, yeah.
Angie, I have a question that you hopefully will be addressed tonight, just about the difference between active and passive integration. That which we're doing intentionally to integrate those insights into our life versus how much can we also just trust that if this medicine really does what we think it does, what are the things that we might just observe and say, okay, will this thing be just naturally easier for me because of what I've experienced, rather than it being as hard as it would be, that just letting things play out versus taking active steps.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll speak to that briefly, and it may come up more later. And I think some of what's coming up for me hearing that, I think also can depend on what's the intention, what are people bringing in? I'm a therapist and I often work with people who are seeking these as healing, medicines. And so whether it's like we're trying to heal depression or PTSD, some of that may just happen. We feel better and we don't totally know why. Or there may be content to process, or there may be active steps. And it may very much vary depending on the person, depending on their mindset, and and depending on sort of the intention. We can also look at recreational settings or spiritual settings. It's not always about fixing a problem. So it can feel good in the moment. It can feel awe-inspiring, and that may change us just inherently by having that experience. So there may be less to do to integrate. So, yeah.
I think I could build on that a little bit and ask, like, knowing when to integrate something like within yourself, but then also knowing when you might need a trusted person to, and how can you find a trusted person?
Yeah.
Who is safe to integrate with?
Right. Yeah, that's good. I didn't put in there much about how to find somebody and who's trusted, but I do go into when things go wrong. There's sort of basic regular integration, and then like what I went through as a teenager, it's like, whoo, I needed some support. Maybe not that extreme, but there is a time and a place where I think additional support and even professional support can be helpful. And how to find the right person. Yeah. I will talk some, if we get to it, about some of the roles of a facilitator or an integration support person. So I'm going to move on, but I welcome questions anytime along the way. So I will either jot them down, or again, a lot of my answers are, we're going to get to that. So this is just, I'm going to go through some definitions and some fun art as well. Just a definition of integration: the process by which material accessed and insights gained in an entheogenic experience are incorporated over time into one's life in a way that benefit the individual and their community. So in my experience, I think integration can give meaning, can give value, can give direction. Maybe emotions are reorganized or a nervous system is re-regulated, and often in sort of an expanded worldview or an expanded container. So it's not just about experiencing an altered state, but actually, how do we want to be different in the world as a result of what we've experienced? So, one more definition I like is just to integrate is to combine one thing with another so that they become whole. For me, part of this is unconscious becoming conscious, or spiritual into the psyche, or higher states of consciousness into our bodies, bigger expanded capacity for holding bigger energy or bigger awareness. So, and then I want to talk about this word, holotropic. This is a word coined by one of my teachers, Stan Groff, with holos meaning whole and trapen meaning to move towards. And I think of the word heliotropic, which is about the sun. So if you've ever had a garden, particularly grown sunflowers, you will see them actually through the day, they turn and they follow the sun. Or anything you plant, it's basically growing towards the sun. So this is a natural pattern in nature. Um, um, nature basically is designed to move towards wholeness. So again, I think it's a natural pattern to want to integrate these disparate states. I want to take a little exercise here, and I want you all to think about where you live. And then I want you to think about the furthest place you've traveled to and how long did it take you to get there? Maybe you had to go on an airplane or a car and a train and a plane or whatever. Just give that some thought. And then imagine if you actually had to walk that, how long that would have taken you. Now, next, I want you to think about going from here to the moon. And again, how long would that take you if we had a car or a plane, spaceship, or if you walked that? That's a long way. I don't even know. Like I'm already kind of like, what? Now think about from here to Pluto. How far away is that? How many light years would it take us to travel there? I don't even know what a light year. My brain doesn't work that way. Okay, and then that's just our solar system. Our solar system is one of at least 100 billion stars in the Milky Way, and the Milky Way is one of billions of other galaxies in the universe. So my point here is that's kind of mind-blowing. Like my mind stopped even trying to calculate that a while back. And in a psychedelic experience, it can be that big. It can be so huge, which is amazing and wonderful and beautiful, and also might be too much. Or again, what happens then? How do we come back into this little container here, little relatively? So Christopher Beisch, who wrote LSD and the Mind of the Universe, says it's an infinite journey. You'll never get to the end of the universe. It's just too vast. And the depth of divinity is just too great. So even though we can access these incredibly expanded states, then what? And how do we hold all that? And what do we do with it when we come back from that? So I think that's where it can be helpful to have some strategies or some tools or some tips for how to do that. And one for me is to break it down into smaller chunks. So if we can begin to put words to our experience, even though the words are just sort of pointing to it, it's a way to, yeah, it's just a way to begin to integrate it. How was that for y'all? Did y'all enjoy your little journey out into the cosmos there? Yeah. So let me go, first of all, I'm kind of going to jump around here a little bit, but this is a basic arc of how I make sense of integration. It really does start with preparation, which can include harm reduction. What are you taking? How much? What's your mindset going in? What's your setting? Do you need support? Do you know how long it's going to last? If it's a plant medicine, great. If it's a chemical medicine, did you test it? Do you know what it really is? Then you go, then you come back. Then, what are we bringing in that we want to bring towards our wholeness? We'll talk about shadow work, again, integrating unconscious content that may have become available in these expanded states. And then how do we make meaning and stabilize? Maybe that's stabilizing our nervous system. Maybe that's stabilizing our mind. Maybe that's stabilizing our life choices that now we need to make now that we've seen what we've seen. So, and then how do we really live this embodied expression of our transformation? And again, I think we can break it down into times, different immediately post, 24 to 48 hours post, 2 to 4 weeks, post, and then ongoing. And then we'll talk a little bit about what happens when things go wrong. So for me, I was with a friend, oh, this was a while ago, and she came out of her journey and she said, I think I'm psychotic. And I was like, okay, well, get a good night's sleep and then we'll check back in tomorrow. So I wasn't worried at all. It's like, of course you feel that way. There's an old term for psychedelics called psychotomimetic. So they actually mimic psychosis. It has similar components to it, but it's not the same. It's specifically because you've just taken this medicine. So immediately post, I think, is a time mainly just to ground. Maybe depending on what you took, you might be exhausted from it. You might be dehydrated from all your crying or throwing up. And, it's not necessarily a time to process. It's kind of just a time to come back and to land. And you may begin to gather a narrative or try to put words to it, but really it's just about transitioning from there back to living in this body. I think 24 to 48 hours post is a really great time to talk and to try to put a story together, to try to make sense of it. It's also often a time of really increased neurogenesis or neuroplasticity. New connections are forming. There's a lot of flexibility and new learning windows that are open. So this can be a good time to say, okay, now what? And do I need to make changes or yeah, so that's a good time to do the sort of talking. And one of my best pieces of advice is just listen, just receive somebody's story. When I first started doing this work, it was just like, tell me. And for a lot of people, for myself, I'll speak for myself growing up in the war on drugs era, it's like, don't talk about it, you'll get in trouble, and so just even giving someone a space where it's like, it's okay to talk about it, tell me. I think that can have a lot of value. And then after that is more where I think the shadow work is. If I'm working with someone that's doing their psychedelic work, if we're meeting weekly or every few weeks, that's a time.
Can you let them in?
Oh,
Realize that
yeah,
you
yeah.
do the thing and then,
Except my cursor.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
For some reason my cursor
I don't know why
disappears.
you're able to do it. I just
That's all right.
gave you-
Great. Okay. So yeah, 2 to 4 weeks and later, that's where it's like, okay, I've heard your story. Now, what are the juicy themes? What are the pieces we need to excavate more or understand more? So that's where, we're going to take more time to really sort of sift through the content or their process of their experience. And this can be ongoing kind of forever. I mean, really, there's no end to, I'm still integrating things from forever ago. So, I'll get more to when things go wrong towards the end, but I'm gonna name, it's not uncommon at all. And I think, again, that friend that thought she was psychotic, like she may have still felt that way the next day. Then I might have been a little more concerned. Or if that went on for more than a week, it depends. But like sometimes people do get really dysregulated and they just can't hold all of that or hold their center with that. So I like the term spiritual emergency. It's too much that has come in. It's not necessarily bad. It's just destabilizing. So what kind of support can we offer people? And sometimes complementary modalities or even the artful use of meds, not my first choice, but what can we do, like the least intervention that works? Okay, if that works, great. If not, what's the next thing? If not, what's the next thing? And occasionally, yeah, people do end up needing more actual structured support. So I'll get into that more towards the end. And then one more of these sort of basic overview slides. Yeah, I think this sort of goes a little bit in order. time-wise as well. Initially, you check in, are they grounded? Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Any other physio needs or changes? This can be a good time to, again, to rest, sort of are you resting, journaling, these sort of basic grounding self-care strategies. And then if they're not grounded in a way that's disruptive, then we might need more of a plan. Then we ask for basic key insights or takeaways. We can listen and reflect back these themes or patterns that we hear. That's part of integration too. When you share something and then the other person can hear it and understand it, and then it's reflected back to you that you're understood and known, that's there's a feedback loop there of like, oh yes, that is this. That is me. That is my experience. Then we can dig deeper. Again, shadow work is when we're dealing with unconscious content that's come up. Like, hey, I don't really want to have to feel this grief from, or whatever it is, something that we normally avoid or don't feel, and then here it is that comes into our awareness. So there are definitely different sort of frameworks for how to work with shadow work. And I would say, generally speaking, it's my opinion that it's not my role to interpret, or generally not to give advice unless there's a safety issue. So I believe that they are their own inner healer, that they ultimately know what's best for them, and I want them to be empowered. I believe they're the experts of their experience, and I trust that. So I'm going to receive, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to reflect back and mirror. And I might ask curious questions, but I'm not going to tell them what I think or what I think they should do. It's one of my pet peeves, and I feel pretty strongly about it. And then later we can assess lifestyle habits. Like, I had one journey where my neck hurt so bad. I have like a little disc thing that every now and then flares up, but it was just completely took over my journey. I was in so much pain, and I was like, I need to do Pilates. Like, my neck hurts because I'm not strong enough in these ways. So I was like, I'm gonna do something about that. And I have, and I've anyway, so depending on what comes up, we can help assess people's lifestyle habits, and we may invite them to take an action step. Again, I'm usually not going to tell them what I think it is, but I'll ask them, so what do you think you need to do about that? And this is where they can begin to have sort of new behaviors or habits that come out of their journey. So I'm going to pause here before we move on. I'm going to do sort of another layer of some of that same stuff, but go a little deeper. But before I do that, just want to pause for comments, for questions. I can keep going.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we really haven't talked about kind of mechanics besides like the steps, but as far as like, is it better to do a one-on-one thing? I think your practice is generally one-on-one, but what about group integration? You know,
Yeah.
Is that preferable to do it one way versus the other? What are the differences? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I love groups, and I do have a slide at the end if we get to it. I think I work a lot with one-on-one, just because that's what I do. But groups, I would love to do groups. I mean, and I do some. I mainly experience groups in a retreat setting where it's a group of people going to journey together, and then we do group integration, and then the group goes home. It's like one of the challenges with groups is everybody has to show up at the same time and be there, and that's logistically more challenging. But and let me go ahead. I'll just skip on to that slide for a second. Hold on. So I don't want to not get to it, and it is sort of towards the end, but real briefly, yeah, I love the quote, "Together we are greater than the sum of our parts." What I experience when I'm in a group is like, one time somebody was processing their grief and it stirred my grief. I wasn't there with it, but when I heard his, I was like, oh yeah, me too. And then flip side of that is, oh, that person's bugging me. Oh. So then and again, oh, what's going on in me that's reacting to this? So the Johari window talks about this thing in 4 quadrants. So like, okay, let's say I think I know who I am, but actually there are parts of me that I don't like to admit. I like to keep those hidden, whether it's intentional, it's usually not intentional, but it talks about how we have our known self. Oh, I can't remember how this all goes. It's not written quite right here. What's known to us and known to everybody else. Okay, so that's just pretty straightforward. Then there's what's hidden from me, but other people can see in me. It's like, oh, Angie, we know you struggle with that. It's like, no, I don't. Oh, yes, you do. So, and then there's what,
Was that one the blind one?
there can be what nobody's aware of as well. So anyway, I'm sorry, I don't have this slide quite right, but can't remember what all the 4 quadrants are, and these words aren't working for me here. But basically, groups can help us see things that are usually unavailable to us, to our regular conscious mind. You know, our shadow stuff, our stuff that we disown isn't intentionally disowned. Usually it's defensive. It's like, that's too much for me to tolerate. So we unconsciously tuck it away. But if the goal is to become whole, if the goal is to have our unconscious become conscious, then a lot of times a group setting can help do that, whether it's by our triggers being stimulated by people or whether it's by feedback that we get from our group friends. So it's also, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, I'm a therapist and I have clients. So there's a role. I'm not a real clinical, like I'm the expert, you're the not. I really believe people are their own experts, but there can be a power differential in one-on-one work. And I think group work can be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just democratized, and it can neutralize power. Like we're all in it together, and there's no one expert saying, you know, again, I don't identify myself doing that in my one-on-one work, but a group, it's really more of a shared process. So yeah, it's a good question. What I'm going to spend most of the time talking about, Joseph, is the one-on-one work or shadow work specifically, and some somatic work. But I really want to mention that I think groups is my favorite. It's my favorite way to work. So let me get back. So back to another quote about preparation. So if I'm going to go hiking in the Himalayas, first of all, I want a Sherpa. I want a guide, someone who's been there before me and knows the terrain, knows to tell me what kind of gear I'm going to need. But I'm also going to need a map. Like I need to know where I'm going. So there's several ways of using that metaphor to think about the map. And I've learned to see this pattern. The hero's journey reminds me very much of a psychedelic journey. So first, we have a call to adventure. My friend says, "Hey, I know about this retreat. You want to come?" I'm like, "Yes." And then I'm like, "Oh shit." Okay, wait, maybe I don't know if I'm going to go or not. And all our stuff starts coming up even before we've left. So and then maybe, you know, in this version, the hero's journey is an archetype. It's a pattern. This is a pattern that repeats in all of nature, and it repeats in all the great stories. One of my favorites is the never-ending story. So, or the Wizard of Oz, but it's the same pattern. It's like, oh, here we go. Oh, there's an ordeal. How am I going to deal with this? including, eventually you cross the threshold. So you go from your ordinary consciousness to the non-ordinary or the special consciousness. And there's often some sort of ordeal. And here in this, they call it facing the shadow self. Anyway, long story, but eventually, maybe reluctantly, you come back and hopefully you come back transformed or with new awareness or new insights. And this is also a spiral. So that one on the left, like we're coming back around from a different perspective when we come back around. So for me, this is helpful to keep this in mind as a way to help make sense of what someone goes through in their journey. What else should I say about that? Yeah, and we see this pattern everywhere. Childbirth. It's like, okay, pregnant, gestating, and then what? I have to go through labor? What? I can't do that. And then you do, or whatever. And then you come out transformed with a baby. I think similar probably with the death pattern. It's like it's scary approaching it, and then who knows what happens, but we cross over. So, I'm not sure I'm going to go into this one too much. I'll name this. This is another thing from Stan Groff. He calls it the cartography of the psyche or the map of the psyche. So I'm going to start with biographical. Biographical is between the time we're born to the time we die. That's our our biography of this lifetime. But what he talks about is we can also, when we go into non-ordinary states, we can go into territory that's beyond our personal biography, so into the transpersonal. So what happens before we're born or after we die? And I don't know that any of us truly knows, but we might encounter things that feel like that, or maybe that are that when we're in these states. So knowing that's possible, this can be helpful if you're working with somebody or sitting with somebody and they've never done this. You might help them understand, hey, you may experience some of these things. You might feel like you're dying. You might feel like you're being born. Like that's okay. We're okay with that. And then there may be ways, again, to work with that. I'm trying to think of how much to go into this because this can get, I'll name this. So he's identified, he was one of the early psychedelic researchers and sat with thousands of people going through particularly LSD sessions, and he repeatedly saw people looking like they were re-experiencing their births. And he identified 4 distinct stages of labor that had 4 distinct sort of patterns. And then there's a correlation with he recognized a correlation from things that happen in that stage that can also show up in your biographical life. So one classic example is if you went through a birth process and the cord was wrapped around your neck. So you experience what feels like suffocating or this great struggle to survive. Maybe in your life you have thyroid issues or something wrong with your throat or your neck, or maybe in a past life, maybe you come up against an experience in a journey where you saw yourself in a past life and you were hanged or beheaded or something. So the point is there can be the word coex, it's called a imagine it being like a thread that can go through the perinatal, the biographical, and the transpersonal realm. So a similar valence of emotional charge or a similar physical experience. So it may show up in people's journeys. And I think the main thing I want to say about this is just to know that could be expected, and that's normal. People will be like, why am I seeing that? Or anyway, if this is something you want to learn more about, it's a little too big to go deep into it for the scope of this talk, but this is one of the theorists that I've studied that helps inform how I understand some of the content that can come up for people in their journeys. And then that informs how we can integrate it and make sense of it. So, and then he also uses the term inner healing intelligence. And I think that's similar to the holotropic, you know, the seed that you plant is going to grow towards the light. What is that in there that's doing that? We are going to heal. We have an innate inner healing intelligence within us. If I get a cut on my hand, it's going to heal. I might need to put a Band-Aid on it, or maybe I need stitches, but ultimately it has a natural healing intelligence. So for me, that really helps inform me trusting people's process, and sort of like Beth said, you know, how much of this can you just let happen? I think a lot of times, yes, we're letting the inner healing intelligence and the holotropic nature of these medicines catalyzes that healing potential. Okay, how are we doing? This is feeling lecture-y, so I'm sorry. Yeah. And I hope this also, my hope is that it can give you something that's not just theoretical, but tangible as well. Where am I on slides? Okay, I have a few things I'll skip too. Okay. So moving along, this is something that I think is important too. Disintegration is necessary for change. So if you think about that hero's journey and that threshold that you cross, when you move from what was to what's next, that's disintegration. It's like, oh, I was there, now I'm here. So that change, that's inherent in change, that we go from order to disorder before reorder. So what was, it's like the caterpillar, you know, and then it goes into a chrysalis and it actually turns to goo and then it becomes a butterfly. So I think these patterns are what I really want you to take away, is knowing, again, my friend that came out and said, I think I'm psychotic. It's like, okay, great. You do that and then see what happens next. By the way, she was totally fine the next morning and completely transformed, but she kind of needed to shake up the snow globe, and that feels disorienting. So this is a good thing to keep in mind in the early stages of integration. Don't freak out if somebody's seems disintegrated. If they stay that way, okay, you know, we might start to be concerned over time. But no, that's a natural and normal and necessary pattern. I think the other is breakdown just before breakthrough. And raise your hands or not, but who here has had a journey where you're like, I just can't take it anymore? And then boom, you can, and boom, the breakthrough happens. So similar, the pattern of labor and delivery, there's a very distinct stage of labor. It's called transition. It's right before the baby's born. And there's a real distinct pattern of the mom saying, I can't do this. It's like, oh, yep, here we are. It's transition time. You're almost done. So knowing, yeah, just when you think you can't stand it, something shifts. And I think that's also sort of a natural inner pattern. If we can believe in that and know, we don't need to freak out and we don't need to intervene. Usually we need to support them and say, you got this, keep going. And then there's this term, regression in the service of transcendence. I think that's similar to what I'll say about my friend that I keep referencing. You know, you need to shake up the snow globe. You know, things often sort of, break down, but it's on the way towards something next. So I wish I had better words for that right now, but I'll leave it at that for now. Okay, so it's almost 7 and I want to leave time. Let me talk a little bit about shadow work. And again, this is what I do a lot of in my therapy office. So I'm going to go back and forth between two slides here. Love this quote from Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life and you'll call it fate. So love this image of an iceberg. What's above the water is what we're consciously aware of, but there is so much more outside of our awareness. And if we're not awake to it, a lot of times what's under the surface is actually driving us. If we go back to my story and my family lineage, my grandfather tucked away all his trauma because it was overwhelming. Like, I'm so glad he did that and lived through it. But he had to avoid like everything. So my whole childhood knowing him, everything was good and everything was fine. And like, we don't talk about anything else. So, and I'm painting a picture to illustrate a point. There's more to him than that, but the concept of there was so much pain for him below the surface that he had to work really hard to not touch it. And that can be stressful, that can take a lot of effort, and that keeps us from being fully whole. And so that's one example, but the next slide and why I want to toggle between these two is I want to talk about, again, back to our biography. We're mammals and we are wired for attachment. So in other words, especially when I'm an infant or a toddler, I am 100% dependent on my caregiver for my survival. So if I'm crying and it stresses my mom out, and then she can't take care of me because she's so stressed out, I'm in trouble. So I'm conditioned, that's one example, but we are all conditioned for survival. And as we grow up and as we develop, we learn to edit out what's unacceptable, whether that's to our caregiver or our community or our tribe or even ourselves. It's like, I don't want to be too angry or too whatever. So it's normal, it's natural, it's how we survive. We sacrifice our full wholeness and our full authenticity for the sake of our attachment needs. And then guess what? Throw some psychedelics in there and it activates the whole system, including the stuff that's been sectioned off into the unconscious. So now we have to deal with it. Y'all following me on that? Okay. So this is what we see a lot. And this is what people come back and they're like, oh, what about that part of me that really wants to express my anger? It's like, how do I do that? Okay. So this slide, this is a different set of teaching, but waking up, growing up, cleaning up. Okay, so what I mean by this is, first of all, there's a waking up. A lot of times when people first do an entheogen or a psychedelic, they're like, oh my God, I am that. It's this realization of who we really are. Our soul's ultimate truth is, we are divinity or we are the cosmos or whatever. We are this transcendent being. So that can be really good to know. Okay, and now what? But then, our growing up, we have, I won't go too into this, but there's developmental tasks that we learn along the way, again, as humans, as mammals, and sometimes those get interrupted. So like, I'll give my example. Anger wasn't okay in my family. So I learned to be a good girl and a people pleaser, and I have a deficit that I've had to work on of like how to have good boundaries or healthy assertiveness and even healthy anger at times. But again, for me, that was part of a growing up. We're all going to have different developmental deficits that, again, doing this work can help highlight where we have those deficits. And then cleaning up. This is what I would name in terms of that shadow work. So the stuff that got sort of repressed, suppressed, avoided. So I have learned various different systems over the years. I didn't go in my bio into all the trainings I've done, but I like to do training. So I've learned different systems. We call these systems for shadow work. Not going to go all into these, but just know that there are different tools we can use for helping people spot their unconscious split off stuff. And then how do we integrate that? So IFS is one of my favorite systems. We can learn about what we call protector parts, and protector parts protect exiles. So exiles are those wounded parts. I don't know how to talk about this briefly, so let me just name these bullet point style for now. Psychoenergetic integration is one that I really like. I'll speak briefly to this. This is, I would say this is a way we work with projections. So I would say projection is the opposite of integration. Projection is when we put it out of ourselves instead of owning it for ourselves. So there are ways we can learn to spot projections. If I'm triggered by somebody, if somebody's being really loud and I'm like, oh, they're so loud, it's like, oh, I'm not very good at being loud or speaking up for myself. So it points to an unhealed or unwhole part of myself. No, but it's them, they're bad. No, okay, let me look at myself. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say about that one for now. I'll name the Enneagram. I'm not a super Enneagram expert. I would love to learn more about it. But again, it's sort of this system where you can recognize fears that drive, like if I'm here I go again with anger. If I'm a 9, which I think I am, 9s are uncomfortable with anger, so they stuff it, and then it comes out passive aggressive. So you can learn about your orientation, and then there's like, here's the antidote, here's what you do about it. And here are the counterbalancing points on the thing. Anyway, so much more I could say, but I think I'll just name, if you want to learn more, there are all these systems. And one of my teachers said, it doesn't matter which one, pick one and learn it, or learn lots of them and you can apply them as needed. But again, it's sort of a pattern that I think gives you a little bit of a roadmap for where are you? Okay, here's what we do about it. Again, it's still, the goal is wholeness, and that's really the Enneagram's ultimate goal, is like, we have one number that's our main personality type, but we all have all those parts, and the goal is to really have an integrated wholeness. I'm gonna just move a little. Psychosynthesis is another one. It works with sub-personalities. This uses a lot of active imagination and visualization. So I've done some work with that and I've enjoyed it. Let me move on to, and I'm close to being done, and then we'll have time for some questions. I want to move on to the definition, some of the definitions of trauma, and this mostly comes from a somatic experiencing focus. So I know we have lots of different plant medicines, or I'm also a chemical medicine person myself, but a lot of these have in common, they can really add energy to the system. They can raise awareness, and this is good, but it can also be too much too fast. So if too much energy comes and it's hard to sit still or stabilize it, I'm thinking about ayahuasca and like, oh, now I need to throw up. Okay. So what happens when there's too much energy or too much shadow content that comes up? And it can be flooding. So we also sometimes need support if we're really struggling to regulate, to stay on our mat or stay inward with our focus. If we had some support, that could be really helpful. If I know somebody's there that can help me co-regulate, that can be helpful. But if I don't have enough support and I'm suffering by myself, that can lead to trauma or dysregulation, or too much stimulation that exceeds the person's ability to regulate their nervous system. So I've seen some people come out and then they're manic or really overstimulated for some time afterwards. This is a good time to really help them ground. Another definition of trauma is the inability to be in the here and now, or to be stuck in a survival reaction. So, trying to think of how this might apply to integration, but yeah, if we've had a traumatic experience, we have a natural reaction in our bodies to survive. So it sends out adrenaline and cortisol, and let me not think, let me jump out of the way of this car that's about to hit me. But then when we're out of the situation, our bodies don't necessarily turn that off. And so we still can stay in this hypervigilant, oh, there's danger even when there's not. So this, I think, can get stirred up when people have trauma in their histories. And again, if you add the medicine and it just amplifies the energy of that, again, this is where I think some people can have trouble in their integration. And then love this quote from Peter Levine: trauma is not what happens to us, it's what we hold inside in the absence of an empathic witness. So this is where I think, whether you have a sitter with you or not, or whether you have somebody to help you make sense and process and integrate your experience, we are mammals, we are humans, we are wired for connection. And so again, even just listening to somebody's story, I think, is part of helping them integrate. So okay, real quick, I'm going to talk about the acronym of SIBAM. So sensation, image, behavior, affect, meaning. Let's just say these are like 5 different channels that awareness can come through. So if I'm sitting with somebody and they're telling me about their journey, and all they're talking about is this imagery, like, oh, I saw this thing and I saw that thing, and it's all this grand visuals. I'm like, great, how do you feel about that? So I often, you can sort of keep this acronym in your back pocket, and if they're focusing more on one, you can ask about the others. Again, we're going for wholeness. So, or if they're like, I saw the thing, it means I have to do this, again, that's the meaning channel. None of these are bad. And, but okay, so you're making all this meaning, like, how does that feel in your body right now? I might ask about their sensations. So any one of these, people can get stuck or overwhelmed, like, oh, yeah, the sensations are too intense. It's like, okay, so tell me, I'm trying to think of an example for that one. Behavior. So movement is behavior, actually. So if somebody's struggling with a whole lot of big energy, sometimes I'll say, okay, move your feet back and forth. And it's like, okay, that gets some of that energy to move. Okay, phew, anyway, so keep this in mind, just as I think of it as we want awareness to be able to flow freely through all 5 of these channels. And often people have access to 1 or 2, but not all of them. So we can actively invite or inquire about ones that they're not speaking through. Does that make sense? Okay. This other one I put in there, I don't know if I can explain that. So nesting bowls. So if we think of our container, our human body, our human nervous system, and then again, the cosmos and the whole thing, like, we can't fit that whole thing in here, or can we? I don't know. We're a micro of that macro. So, but I think my point here is sometimes when the energy is big, it's like when we move from the small bowl, can we move from the small bowl to a bigger bowl? If I have all this energy coming through me and it feels really intense, can I imagine being the next size bowl? Can I imagine making my container bigger to hold it? We can do this with our breath. We can do this with imagery. I think there's a lot more I could say about that, but
Is this, Are you specifically referring to during the journey, or are you talking more about integration here?
Yeah, this one, that's a good question. And I think that's one of the things I'm struggling with this. This reminds me more of in the journey, but I think people can blow out their container in the journey, and then they're disintegrated because they're like their bowl broke, basically. So it's like they're not contained anymore, and that's sort of what I felt like in my spiritual emergency. I was just like my container broke, and so the whole universe was just coming through me.
Do you feel like you might have avoided that spiritual emergency if you had had better support?
1,000%, yeah, totally. And I had some good support, but not enough and not of the right kind. So absolutely, yeah. So keeping this as a concept in mind, if somebody comes after a journey and they're just all over the place and they're just uncontained, what can help add more containment? That might be a good time, where they're not left alone and they can have somebody walk in the woods with them and let them say all the things they need to say. And then, okay, now I need to go. Can we get you to another friend that can sit with you for a while? Yeah. So those are the things that can help until their container kind of comes back online. Sometimes we need that external support to help contain. Yeah, I've already talked about this, but this is just a slide. So a spiritual emergency is an overwhelming crisis of transformation. You can read those words. I don't have to read them all to you. It's things I've already said, but this is one of my main reasons why I want us as a community to have more understanding of how to help people integrate. We can support people when things are normal. We can support people when things are a little bit rocky. I think we can support people hopefully to avoid worse outcomes that really can happen for some people. So doesn't have to go to a hospitalization crisis or worse. But we need to know how to recognize when people are in trouble and ways to support them. So when someone's dysregulated like that, it's generally not a time to process content. It's a time to ground and contain and stabilize. It can look like psychosis or mania. And then I also want to name there is an inherent healing arc in that what were the words? Disintegration. Yeah. So it's shaking up the snow globe, order, disorder, reorder. The disorder, like it's okay, but let's hold you so that you don't end up in trouble. Let's hold you in trust that that there is a reordering that is on its way. And then I won't go through this next one, but the one after it, this is a specific Jungian psychiatrist in the 60s and 70s actually sat with people that were inpatient for psychosis, but he did it without medicine, and they stayed in there, and there was a very predictable pattern, and it was the same thing. It was this recognizable and predictable pattern. So first, I won't go all into it, but like basically my main point is there is a pattern, just like the hero's journey. And if we support it and help with containment, but don't interfere or intervene, it will generally naturally run its course. In his experience, it was average of 6 weeks. And if you think about all the myths of 40 days and 40 nights, and it's like, oh, how many weeks is that? So again, the pattern is known and recognized. And again, someone in that state, it's hard to be out in the world. So people sometimes need more support or containment, but that's different than suppression, which is what our typical psychiatric tools will do to respond to that. Yeah, fever is uncomfortable and then functional. So briefly, I'm almost done. We already talked about groups, love groups, yay groups. last thing I want to, close to last thing, shadow work for the facilitator. So this is a really good system. I always love to plug Kylea Taylor. She has a book called Inner Ethics. And I think if we're going to be sitting with people, whether that's in sessions or whether that's in integration, we also need to do our own shadow work. Again, all that stuff that's below the water level and the iceberg will affect how we work with people if we're not aware of it. And so this is a great roadmap here for how to identify we all have them, what are my unhealed parts? What are my unmet needs and longings? And the more we can be aware of them and work to integrate them ourselves, then we will be less likely to act them out with our clients. The best example I have of this has to do with, power or sex or love. So we can go to all of these energy centers. And again, we all have these needs and longings. We all want to feel powerful or know that we are, or feel love or whatever. We've all heard about facilitators who have acted out sexually with their clients. So I would say if you know you're longing for sexual connection, or that's an area that you don't have in your regular life, be careful. Don't act that out with your clients. Same with power. This happens a lot in this community. Who's really doing the healing? A lot of facilitators are like, I'm the best psychedelic therapist in the world. It's like, well, yeah, that's an ego need. Again, nothing wrong with having ego needs, but don't act them out on your clients. That can be harmful to the clients and it can get in the way and get you in trouble. So good roadmap or system here to learn about and to inquire about your own professional vulnerabilities to ethical misconduct. I think we're all responsible for not acting out and causing harm to clients. Any quick questions about that before I move on? Love her book. It's a great, easy read as well. So, and basically, yeah, back to that point, who's doing the healing? You know, in a labor and delivery situation, it's not the doctor, or ultimately the midwife isn't doing the delivering. The woman is, and the baby is, and nature is. The midwife is there to provide support. When the freak out comes, they say, keep going, you got this. They get you, you know, ice chips or whatever you need, but it's not them doing it. So please keep that in mind in your roles. We trust the person's inner wisdom and inner healing intelligence, and it's not us doing it. So get out of the way. Summary slide here. So beyond the basics, which we went over in the beginning, do your own inner ethics shadow work. We are midwives for the soul. We recognize the pattern. We trust the process. We don't abandon, but we also don't interfere. And it's good to have a system for shadow work, or multiple ones. So the ones I've named, if you want to learn more about them, Google them or study them or whatnot. Orient towards a way of spotting, reclaiming projections, integrating disowned parts, and know and trust they are the hero of their own journey. We listen for the patterns and track the progress so that you know where they're going. When you see somebody disintegrated, again, trust that things may get more chaotic, but that we're also moving towards the reorganization. One of the things I didn't say about the energy wells is when you move from one to the other, it's chaos. So it's like, oh, here's the edge, oh, boom. And so, again, that's hard to put words to, but when there's transitions, when the medicine's first coming on, or when they have to come back to life, like those transition times are when people often need more support and stabilizing. And then this one, I didn't really develop this point in this version of this talk, but stitching disparate states. So there to here. So cosmos to body, spirituality to psyche, like we're integrating these disparate states, there to here. How do we take that awe and that transcendence that we experience and then bring it back to our life, to our lived life? Yeah, sorry, this summary was written for a talk that had a few other slides that I didn't get to in here, but yeah, the goal is bringing the there back to here, the cosmos through the psyche to the soma or to the body. How do we live an embodied, changed life as a result of the journey we just went on? So, and then lastly, love. Whatever you do, do it with loving awareness. For creatures, small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love. So being that compassionate witness to somebody's process, even if you don't know anything about shadow work or anything about what to do about it, just beam your love at them, be a compassionate witness to their process, and that in and of itself is healing. And anything that is not that is suspicious of some of your own shit. So if I'm sitting with somebody and instead of feeling just loving awareness or compassion for them, if I'm triggered or irritated, it's like, let me look at me, because the goal is to be able to stay in that state when you're with people. So ta-da. Yeah, thank you. So some lecture-y, some hopefully tangible action steps, and a little bit of time for questions. So
We have about 7 minutes, before we need to start wrapping up. The library closes at 8. So does anybody have any questions for Angie? It's very comprehensive. Thank you so much. I'm going to just do a couple of announcements if that's okay. You'll, if you want to learn more about integration, Angie and Kelly are going to be teaching integration workshops. There's going to be an introductory workshop. So Angie is teaching for therapists, if some of you are therapists in the room. Kelly will be teaching a workshop that's focused more on peer support. So those of us who are friends or family members of people who are journeying, how we can provide support in their integration process. And those dates are on our Facebook page. So has everybody found us on Facebook so far? That's the best place to keep updated. And our website is a fantastic place to stay updated as well. Decrimnaturenwa.org. We have a newsletter that goes out twice per month, once at the beginning of the month and once right before the education night, just to remind everybody to get here. And we're so thankful for all of you who come, because this is a nice size room. It's fine. But I want to graduate to bigger rooms, because when we have bodies meeting together in community, that is what shows our city councilors, our legislators, the people who are making decisions about things like decriminalizing entheogenic fungi. That shows them that we care. And it's the only way. I think we're all kind of done with the online socializing. It doesn't work. People showing up is what works. And so we are so thankful. This is the biggest one we've had so far. So thank you for your preparation. That was incredible. Another thing that's coming up next weekend is the Open Plains Psychedelic Therapy Symposium in Tulsa, April 18th and 19th. It starts on Friday and goes all day Saturday, and then there's an after party Saturday night. We have not a block of rooms, but a group of us is staying at the Fairfield Inn. We'd love for anybody in this room or anybody online to reach out to us for more information and come hang out with us. It's going to be great. Angie's going to be speaking. Jessica and Aaron are going to be speaking, and they've got a keynote speaker that we're really excited about, Sarko Gregarian, who is the only lieutenant in the United States who has been approved by his department to participate in the psychedelic or an entheogenic church. So he's going to talk about
law, religion, and his experiences. Our next education night is May 20th. That's always the third Tuesday of the month, and we alternate between Bentonville and Fayetteville libraries. So next month it's going to be at the Bentonville Library, and our speaker is going to be our very own Joseph Hood, who is going to be speaking on entheogens 101, how psychedelic plants and fungi affect the brain. So he's going to get down and dirty, nitty gritty into the fun, you know, the mechanics of these medicines, and we're really excited about that. And then I know you're probably wondering, how can I help? So of course, being here, showing up, bodies in seats is the best way that you can get connected and help. We were sponsored tonight by Sacred Roots Healing, and I just wanted to mention that again. Susan Kilpatrick sponsored the room. This room costs us $75. There's a bigger room that will cost $100 if you can graduate to that here in Fayetteville. It's way cheaper in Bentonville. It's like $12.50 or $25 even for a big room. So we have a sign up genius on our events page where you can click on that and sign up to sponsor a room. You can sign up to bring a snack if that's what your budget allows. You can sign up to help sponsor a speaker. So we're bringing in Taryn Hale, who was the attorney who defended and turned around Jessica's case in Indiana. So he's going to be coming to speak. And I think we're going to get Sarko to come here as well. So paying for airplane flights and things like that, we need help with that too. Did you have a question?
No, I'm just thinking.
Oh, you're just thinking,
I'll
okay.
finish this.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if you're interested in supporting a future event, check out that Sign Up Genius link on the events page of our website. Don't forget to sign up for emails if you're not signed up for those yet. And if you don't like technology, you can sign up for emails right here. And then if you like our t-shirts, we also have an order form right here. The Decrim Nature t-shirt, and it says on the back. So, yeah, so if you want one of these bad boys, you can get either a t-shirt or a sweatshirt. We're looking to source them more effectively, but right now they're costing us $37 or $48 for a t-shirt or a sweatshirt because they're full color and we get them
Locally.
printed locally. Yeah, so if we can get a better price, we will, but we're only charging our cost. We're not trying to make a dime with this. So,
And one more note on that,
Yeah.
we are gonna reprint some stickers and stuff
Yeah.
like that. We just have some, we wanna add the website. So
Yeah.
those will just go around.
and our goal is to get city councils to pass resolutions to functionally decriminalize entheogenic plants and fungi by deprioritizing for our local police the arrest and prosecution of individuals who possess, grow, gather, gift, cultivate, all those things. So nobody should be going to jail for this. I think that's it. So thank you so much, Angie. Thank you, everyone.